Two presentations before our panel discussion. The first is Brodie Fleming, who's the director of Brand Canberra. Brodie's going to be talking about the Canberra Hero's Journey.
I might move this so I don't have a team to turn it over. Thanks, Kim, and hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Brodie Fleming. I have the great privilege of looking after the Brand Canberra program for the ACT government, and it's terrific to be here at the ANU today, a distinctly Canberran place, and a place that's been helping us improve our understanding of ourselves and our neighbours for about 70 years. It happens to be on the traditional lands of the Ngunnawal people. For 20,000 years, the Ngunnawal have been hunting and fishing here, living and working here, sharing their stories here. If you go a bit further down the road this way, you'll hit Canberra's city centre, and that's where my workplace, the ACT Government's Economic Development Directorate offices are. It's also on Ngunnawal land. And then if you go south of the lake, you'd reach my home. It's also on Ngunnawal land. So I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional lands that we're meeting on, and to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and any other people or families with connection to this land, and to thank them. Thank them for looking after the land that I've lived on, worked on and played on for 42 years. I'm here today to share some findings from a unique research project to uncover a story about what it feels like to live in Canberra and to be Canberran. A story about who we are, what we do, why we live where we live, and what all of that means. There are many other terms for story: an identity, a reputation, a brand, or in this case, a place brand. But we preferred story because story is simple. It's for everyone. When a story is good, when it resonates with truth, it's easy to tell and impossible to forget. Knowing our story will enable us to appreciate all that our territory has to offer, instill a sense of pride in every Canberran, to share and promote our success. But most importantly, our story helps us to differentiate ourselves from any other place in the world. So what did we do? First, we enlisted the help of two terrific Canberran businesses, True North Content and Creative. We knew from the start we didn't want to do more group workshops where we all choose between innovative or resilient or sustainable or any of these other universal synonyms for place goodness. Instead, we gathered a team of conversationalists, authors, journalists, researchers, content designers, copywriters, and we set them the task of listening to the way Canberrans naturally tell their stories of this place. They interviewed 65 Canberrans in total. They came from all across the city and the region, north of the lake, south of the lake, public and privately employed, young and old, people who had arrived here very recently and those who'd lived here for more than 40 years. And we had conversations with them. Each of them were at least an hour long, and they were one-on-one. They went in all sorts of directions. We asked how they came to be here, why they choose to stay, what they love, what they struggle with. If they had to leave Canberra, what would break their heart? Our team were hunting for a feeling of what can only happen here. They were listening for a pattern to the way Canberrans tell their stories. Consistent themes began to emerge. Threads appeared again and again. We backed up all these conversations by reading the earliest stories of our city, and we later followed it with a sample survey. What I'll share today reflects the voices of Canberrans. There are a few parts to the findings that I'll touch on. There is the setting, what Canberrans love about Canberra. There's our character, who we are and how we feel when we're at our best. The plot, the structure that emerged again and again in the way you told us your stories. One master story, which is one creative expression of all of those findings, and some of the shadow elements that came through in those interviews. The words are drawn from the research, but they are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of depth behind them. Our city's urban design and setting came up often. We heard people describe a great sense of abundance about Canberra today. Our city brings together Australia's most precious things. In our galleries, museums and festivals, we curate those gifts and we share them freely. We know we're lucky to live and work here. We're not exhausted just getting through the day. We have time to be kind. The resources at our fingertips help us design a life we love. Dion Bisa of East Hotel moved her family back to Canberra from Sydney to give more to the business her parents had been building here for years. She recalled a particular trip back to Canberra that felt different to her earlier ones. She said there was a new energy here and new ideas. Now there are so many new things happening, I can't keep up. We heard people describe an expansive sense of space. Sheena Ireland of Canberra Women in Business shared memories and feelings of returning to Canberra after travelling. As soon as you drive into Canberra, you see how much space we have. It's a sense of calm and control, a sense of home. It can be hard for others to understand a city with bush between its town centres and satellite suburbs, but in Canberra, space defines us, literally and figuratively. We have space to move, to breathe and to create. Canberra is not finished, locked in or filled up. On the contrary, there is room for new people to find their community and make a place their own. Interestingly, they also described a closeness. Even with all our open space, there is intimacy and familiarity here. It's in the sound of kookaburras in the early morning, in the waves to people we know on our walks down Lonsdale Street or up Mount Ainslie. Alex Sloan, formerly of ABC Radio, was laughing as she told the story of attending a sold-out opening night performance of a show at the Canberra Theatre. I trod on his toes and realised it was the Governor-General. Alongside these gifts that the city gives us, we heard Canberrans tell us how they can feel a certain way living here. Canberrans told us they feel purposeful. We are a city born from a sense of purpose, designed to capture the way of life, aspirations and ideals of a nation. Our work has meaning. In our companies, educational institutions and government departments, people dedicate their time to making something better. Jason Van Balliguin, a communications manager for one of Canberra's national collecting institutions, put it pretty simply. Canberra has a purpose that precedes the place. Canberrans feel deeply interested. We ask the big questions because we live in a place where they can be answered. We attract people eager to learn and international experts. Canberrans value breadth of experience and breadth of identities. There's room to explore the range of interests that make life good. Canberra's much-loved lifestyle and culture publication, Her Canberra's Amanda Whitley, has been nourishing our interests for years and was pretty succinct when she said, I think we're experience seekers and we're curious. We heard that Canberrans feel nurturing. Bridie MacArthur, a Year 12 student in Canberra's amateur theatre community, was considering where next after graduating. She was thinking about the networks she'd built here and what she might miss if she left. She said, here, when people show up, it's less about how it looks, it's more about how it feels. We create space for new ideas and to help them grow. People are confident starting something new here because they feel like the community has their back. And lastly, we feel balanced. This one doesn't surprise many. We have time and space to decide the tempo of our lives, to be present and enjoy the moment. Being surrounded by nature, it's easy to find our way to the bush, to restore and to recharge. Having time and space makes us reflective, not reactive. Our decisions echo across the nation, so we take a considered approach. Vikram Sharma, cybersecurity genius and CEO of Quintessent Labs, put it best in a very gentle, wise and knowing tone. Many places in the world have unique elements to them, but putting them all together and getting a balance, that's what's special about Canberra. That's our setting and our character. Next to plot. Author Christopher Booker theorised that there are only 7 kinds of plots that a story, any story, will follow. You might believe him, you might not. Things like overcoming the monster, think David and Goliath stories. Rags to riches, Cinderella is the classic. Comedy, The Quest, tragedy, Voyage and Return, and rebirth. While Canberra is a diverse enough place to contain stories that reflect all variety of plot types, the plot structure that seemed to come up again and again in our conversations with Canberrans was rebirth. Stories tended to move from some sense of unfulfilled potential through to flourishing. Knowing this pattern allows us to tell a range of Canberran stories with a central idea at their core. It makes them true of this place, it makes them relatable and inspiring. Knowing a base plot, which at its core is a story about realising potential, helps us to invite others to this place with promises we're sure we can deliver on. Taking all that we heard, the team were tasked with producing one creative interpretation of the findings, a master story. For thousands of years, the Ngunnawal have hosted guests from other nations and shared the gifts of this region. Then, when Australia came together in federation, we needed a capital, and this place of limestone plains was chosen. They named us Canberra. It was the chance to design a new kind of city. The hope was that our capital would reflect the best of what Australia could be. We were imagined as a place of flowing water, conversations unfolding along tree-lined avenues. Compromise is never easy. Our first residents saw us as more sterile, more concrete. When a city's business is government and administration, it can feel all function and process, a place where politics happens and not much else. People came here reluctantly, just to get ahead in their careers, preparing to leave even before they arrived. Yet, the spirit of this place worked on them. Where some saw barren space, others saw room to create, to plant something and watch it grow. Many of us came from somewhere else, which fostered a distinct sense of community. You see it in the way we look out for each other, in the sporting teams we love, the causes we back and the work that needs to be done. With layers of commitment, Canberra came to life. We became a city worth staying for. This place of arcing roads and autumn trees became home. Living here means having space to draw breath. We choose the tempo of our lives. We throw ourselves into our work and we celebrate when it's done. We look out our windows and see big blue skies and the snow-capped brindabellas. Kids swim in rivers and hear the calls of cockatoos and rosellas. There is room to roam and explore. We succeed in Canberra by believing there's room for everyone, for new people and new ideas. It's why businesses are sprouting almost every hour. Baristas, curators and eco-warriors, tradies, engineers and artists. We look outward and forward. We ask the big questions with the optimism we'll uncover the answers. We love exploring, but we also love knowing we're home when we catch sight of Black Mountain's tower. Don't expect us to be like other cities. We were always intended to be a different place. We're ready to welcome you whenever you come around. Thank you. That's one creative interpretation of all of the findings, and it is framed inherently as an optimistic story. After all, the purpose was to tell the story of who we are when we're at our best. However, implicit in that optimism is the notion that there are times when we're not at our best, when people don't experience our values, when we might choose a different path. Several shadow elements emerged in our research, and it's important that we continue to consider and explore these areas as we grow as a city and as a community. While many do eventually form a deep connection with the city, it's not always easy at first. Canberra's difference can be disorienting. So how are we supporting new arrivals in making sense of this place? It can be hard to meet people here. There are some new arrivals who thrive, but others struggle to find their people. So how do we nurture social connections? Canberrans' privilege sometimes makes us disconnected from the people who struggle, both people elsewhere in Australia but also within our city. How do we listen to the less comfortable and, for Canberrans who struggle, help them to feel that their interests matter? Because of Canberra's ambitions to draw together Australia's culture, Western stories and ideas of urban development often dominate. Ngunnawal stories and connection to land can be pushed to the margins. So how do we maintain space for Ngunnawal needs and perspectives? And lastly, sometimes we can be a little too complacent, pretty comfortable here. So how do we continue to foster ambition and application? While access to nature is treasured, our city landscape is changing, both with urban infill and new developments. So how do we preserve the essence of Canberra's access to nature? How this story, its themes and those shadow elements are used differs from scenario to scenario. Mostly it's a framework, which sounds like a very government thing to name it. It's not intended to be recited verbatim, but to be used and interpreted as needed through many different lenses. It can be used to shape the way we talk about ourselves, as a touchstone for making decisions, as a guide for starting something new. But at its simplest, it should be used to ask questions. Before you say or do anything, ask yourself, does this bring us closer to our best or further away? Does this keep us Canberran? If you are Canberran or want to be more Canberran, this story and all of its components are yours. Thank you.